All right, let's just dive right into it. Today, we are looking at a piece of hardware that is, well, trying to solve a very specific and very annoying problem in AV
Oh,
installation.
absolutely. The classic installer's dilemma.
Exactly. We are doing a deep dive into the Kramer PA-120Z power amplifier. We've pulled the technical specifications and the feature breakdown for this one, and our mission for today is simple. We want to see how this single box attempts to bridge that gap between high-fidelity local audio and those, complex high-voltage commercial runs.
Because usually you have your precision gear for the conference room and your heavy artillery for the hallway ceiling speakers, right?
Right.
And you rarely find a single device that handles both without compromising one side of the equation.
Yeah, and looking at the spec sheet here, the big headline is obviously that switchable output topology. It claims to handle both low Z and high Z. Now, you and I both know how dual mode amps work on paper.
Yeah, they can get messy.
Right, usually when you flip that switch to 70 volt, you lose something in the translation. The transformer taps get muddy, or the heat management just goes completely haywire.
Right, because the physics of driving a 4-ohm load versus a 100-volt line are totally different.
Okay.
But here, the configuration seems to handle the thermal load of high Z without choking the fidelity on a low Z side. So you can run it as 2 channels of 60 watts for your standard stereo setup.
Or bridge it.
Exactly, you bridge it for a single 120-watt mono channel for the high voltage distribution.
Which honestly is a logistical dream. If you are an integrator, you don't want to stock 5 different SKUs. You want one box you can just pull off the truck for. I think the brochure says any type of loudspeaker installation.
Yeah.
But that Swiss Army knife approach usually makes me a little nervous. If it does everything, does it actually do anything well?
That is always the fear. But when you look at the signal flow diagram, they haven't just slapped a transformer on the output. It is the built-in DSP that actually makes this interesting.
Yeah, I caught that. The individual mix per output feature specifically. That is not something you typically see in a power amp of this size. Looking at the block diagram, it looks like you can effectively bypass the room EQ entirely for the line out.
Which is huge. Think about your standard lecture hall scenario.
Sure.
You need to EQ the room speakers, maybe roll off the low end so the presenter's voice isn't booming and muddy all over the place.
Right, you don't want to record the room's acoustic problems.
Exactly. And if you are simultaneously sending a feed to a recording device or a Zoom room, you want that signal flat and clean. With this, you separate those mixes internally.
Which saves you from having to burn an extra O-bus on your main matrix just to get a clean record feed.
Exactly. And you can set a master volume, a 3-band parametric EQ, and high-pass filters independently for those different zones.
That is super handy. And while we are talking about signal purity, we really have to mention the DAC. They threw in a 32-bit digital analog converter,
Yeah, that caught my eye too.
which feels like total overkill for a commercial amp, right? I mean, are you really going to hear the difference between 24-bit and 32-bit over a ceiling speaker in a lobby?
In a noisy lobby? Probably not. But think about listener fatigue. If you are driving high-frequency content over distance, minimizing clock jitter is what keeps the audio clean over long periods.
Ah, right.
It is less about audiophile perfection and more about ensuring the signal integrity holds up to 96 kilohertz. This is really good headroom to have.
Fair point, definitely. Now, usually when you pack that much distinct functionality into one box, the DSP, the dual mode rails, the high-end DT, you expect a massive footprint just to dissipate the heat. But this is part of their Mega Tools line.
Right, it is a half rack width.
Yeah.
2 of them fit side by side in a single 1U rack space. It is incredibly dense. And density is usually the enemy of longevity because of heat buildup.
But the specs claim it is fully protected against overcurrent, DC voltage, and overheating. I assume this is a Class D architecture doing the heavy lifting there.
It is Class D, which keeps it efficient. But they've also included intelligent heat-sensitive fans. It really seems built to survive the abuse of a typical closet that doesn't have great ventilation.
Which, let's be honest, is where 90% of these things end up anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
Speaking of abuse, there is one feature here that I think saves the most headaches. The customizable auto standby.
Oh, yes.
Because there is nothing worse than an amp with an aggressive eco mode. You know the drill. The CEO pauses for dramatic effect during a speech. The amp decides silence means sleep. And then the first 3 seconds of their big finish is total silence while the amp wakes up.
The dreaded noise floor problem.
Exactly.
This unit actually lets you change that threshold. You can define exactly what the noise floor is so the amp stays awake when it's supposed to, saving power only when you actually want it to. It just creates a much smoother experience for the end user.
It really is those quality of life details that separate the pro gear from the consumer stuff. So, just to wrap this up, we have a compact Class D workhorse that gives you 120 watts of power, handles the low Z and high Z switching without a meltdown, and includes enough DSP to save you some rack space.
It is a very compelling package. It successfully bridges that gap we talked about at the start.
So, here is the thought I want to leave you with today. We are seeing devices like the PA-120Z becoming increasingly software-driven, right, with DSP, web control, customizable thresholds. As these boxes become more adaptable, are we moving toward a world where the physical limitations of hardware no longer dictate room design?
That is a great point. If the amplifier can change its personality via code, does the hardware spec even matter as much as the software interface?
That is the question that's probably going to define the next decade of AV hardware. Something for you to chew on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.